Hi and welcome to MIND123. I'm Chantal and I'm here today with Shiike Vanderwerrff. Welcome along, Shiike.
Thank you, wonderful to be here, Chantal.
Now, we are talking today about keeping a cool head in a modern world.
And it's such a great topic. I love talking about this, so relevant in our modern world, the cool head, hot head paradigm.
Yeah, so do you want to set the scene for us and talk to us about the features of a cool head versus a hot head?
The hot head, yeah. So what are they? Something we can both relate to, I think, at different times in our day. A hot head is where we tend to be overwhelmed by what's happening. As a result, we tend to overreact to what's happening. And we may well end up doing things that we regret or that we wish we had done differently, either through what we've said or how we've responded. We might also do something that's completely irrelevant to, in fact, what's happened. So we lose our focus, essentially, which a cool head seems to have in spades. They are calm under pressure, they collaborate easy, they show creativity and context to what's in front of them. So a cool head and a hot head, we all have both, and the big question is, are we aware of it? And that's the secret to understanding how we can maybe manage being a cool head a little more often if we want to.
Excellent. So today you're going to be sharing with us some tips and some tricks on exactly how we can harness that cool head side, right?
We can. And let me give you an example first.
Please do.
Because we all have blind spots, right? You don't know what you don't know. I gave a recent presentation at the local Chamber of Commerce. Afterwards, there was a gentleman in his 60s who had nearly 40 years in emergency medicine. Now, during that my facilitation, he had to be at work and at home and imagine what the people around him would see him as. Is he a cool head at work? Is he a hot head at work? And the same at home. Needless to say, he knew that he was a cool head at work. Like when you see arteries spurt up the wall in Grey's Anatomy, he's the man that can control that situation. He can get the team working in a constructive manner. It was the first time he had seen that at home he was a hothead. And it's not something he had seen before. He felt that his three children, year 12 and above, and his wife as well, he was at constant loggerheads with. He felt frustrated, he felt like he was constantly overreacting, it was irritation. He felt almost like it was a battleground. Now he, for the first time, saw that the skills that made him a cool head were things that he could take from work to home. Because that's it, they were just skills, they were just things that he had learnt to do, either consciously or otherwise.
So what I'm hearing is the first step is taking a look at our lifestyles and working out what areas we have those cool head tendencies and where we have the hot head tendencies. That's where we can really learn. Excellent.
Because reality, and this is a saying that I'm sure you've heard, reality is between our ears. You know, we don't just film what's in front of us, we project on what's in front of us. So we can both look at a painting and see it very differently, for example. It's still the same painting. So what's going on inside our minds has a huge impact, and that can serve us. Cool heads can serve us, or it can enslave us. You know, we can all of a sudden become frustrated or irritated with what's going on, and how we see something can have a huge influence on that, because we are not our thoughts, and that's probably the first step. Much like the context of work versus home, we need to see that there is a little bit of separation between what we're thinking and us. We can learn to have a look at what we're thinking simply by asking the question or taking a moment to pause. So that would be first step number one. We're not our thoughts. Now that sounds a bit counterintuitive because we have our thoughts, but just like we do something, we're not that action, it's simply something we've done. Thinking is a little bit the same.
Okay, so that's number one. What would you say is number two?
Number two is fun, and I'm going to ask you a question, Chantal.
Please do.
How many thoughts can you think at once?
Well, in busy time, I feel I can think hundreds of thoughts at once.
We all do.
Thousands of thoughts sometimes.
So while we can have thousands of thoughts in our head, and our subconscious has a record of everything we've ever experienced, taste, touch, all of it, we can only think one thought at once. We can only focus on one thought at once. Which is great, because if you are aware that that thought is holding you back or putting you down or telling you something that you're not good enough at doing or remunerating something that hasn't happened, and giving it a negative bias and getting anxiety from that, you can choose to think another thought. You know, it's a little bit like having a favourite song stuck in your head. Sometimes, you know, you've got songs stuck in your head, you can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
Well, that is embedded deeply in your subconscious, and your subconscious loves repetition.
Yeah. Much
like when we're looking at writing new scripts or new mental patterns, we simply have to embed them, much like we would a new song. Oh, I'm hearing a song for the first time. It's not so, I don't like it, but I hear it a few times and all of a sudden I'm hooked. And new thoughts that productive, that are empowering, that enable us to keep a cool head, they can be a bit like that. A bit clunky at first, but if we can only think one thought at once, the American Indians have this great saying, you can only sit on one horse with one bottom. And it's kind of, you know, we can try and sit on, but ultimately we're just splintering our ability to focus.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from that is that we need to think about those situations in which we are a cool head and draw from that the positive thought, or the positive thought from that situation, and that's what we're trying to apply to create that new
that you've
pathway.
Got the skill and talent. Yeah, you've got the skill and talent. So have the self-belief that you can take that skill and talent and you can apply it in different contexts.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. But you have to see that you've got it first, that you can do it.
You have to recognise it. Okay.
So you're not your thoughts, you can think one thought at once. The third aspect to this is that mental patterns are just like physical patterns, just like emotional patterns. So if you wake up and you get a coffee from the same place at the same time from the same person every day, so on and so on and so on, we're creatures of habit. You know, we brush our teeth in the same. Well, the thoughts that serve us or enslave us tend to come up at the same time in the same instance. With the gentleman that I used before, he knew that was his hot time when he went home after work. He was already a bit mentally exhausted from a day, and now here were the challenges. So what were his opportunities, or what could he say to himself differently to see that differently and have a different application? So they're so habitual, we know when they're coming, we know when we need the scripts.
We know when they're happening.
If I'm looking in a mirror and I'm focusing on my faults, well, that's not the same as looking in a mirror and seeing my
the positives,
beauty and my positive.
Yeah, it's a great mindset to have and to start to think about how we can change the way that we're thinking to move forward with that cool head.
Yeah, some of the scripts that go over and over in our mind have been given to us from very early on in our life. We might have been told we're not good enough for this, or we're too this, or we're too that.
Yeah.
And we don't even know that we're playing them unless, you know, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. So changing that process within our mind and moving towards the habits that you're talking about, is that something that we can do? Is it a short-term thing, or how long would it take for us to implement those to make that change in our life?
It's very individual. You're going to put your thumbprint or your signature all over this. We know that we can accelerate. There are techniques that some people respond to very quickly, and we've all understand the concept of cold turkey, where someone's doing something sometimes addictively, and then all of a sudden they stop and they do something else. Yeah. For some people, it can happen. They seem to be the exception to the rule, for mine, and that brings up the fourth and final piece to this puzzle, is that developing mental strength around this and the ability to apply this over time as we need it. Think of your mental muscle much like you would think of any other muscle in your body. We know that a fresh muscle responds best. We know that what you feed your muscles has an impact. And we also know how you train muscles enables them to do more, faster, stronger. So put that into our mental application, it can be very powerful. If we are wanting to really try hard to do something at the end of a long day, and it might be lean into an important relationship, or it might be to achieve something, if we're literally exhausted, we might need to plan a little time to be a little fresh before doing that. Are we aware of what we feed our brains? Are we switched on to electronics without boundaries 24 hours a day? Because we're not designed to do that. Are we aware of the media and so forth that just fills up all our attention span, as opposed to learning to focus on things that can be quite nourishing? And the last one, of course, what's our brain training? You know, and it can come from an app. It can also come from a technique. So I know that what's in front of me is going to be a challenge. I might have to deal with a tough conversation, or I might need to have to give a presentation. How do I need to get in state? How do I need to prepare myself mentally for that in the best possible way?
Something that you said in there, which I found really interesting, and thinking about your example of the emergency worker and putting the focus during his day, but then getting home and being a completely different situation, it makes me think how important it is that if the relationship that we're trying to improve, and if we're trying to be that cool head at home, as you just gave the example, if we're getting to the end of the busy day and we're exhausted, we can't put the energy there, then it goes to show how important it is to maybe set some time aside to either be with your partner or your children or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily at the end of the day.
Yeah, because you mightn't have an hour siesta. You might, your day might just roll on.
So being fresh, as you talk about, is so important.
And sometimes you might only have like a minute to do that. Can you just take a break? A little bit of self-time and self-care can have a huge payoff for the things. And it makes a difference, makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. So Shiike, we have covered a lot of ground already. So can I ask you just to summarise and go through those 5 points one more time for us?
Yes, of course. The real takeaway is our internal world or creates our external world. You know, our reality is between our ears. Is that, number one, can we see that as something that's not ourselves that we can begin to manage? Number two, do we have the thought that we want to have? So how many thoughts can we think at once?
That one.
Number one. And is that serving us or is that enslaving us? Number three, our mental patterns are as habitual as all of our patterns, and we are creatures of habit. So we know when we need to do something about something if we stop to take a look. Which area is giving, what would I like to do something about? And that's when it's coming, so that's when I need a new script or a new approach. Number four, how do I train my mental muscle? Am I aware of what I'm feeding my mind? Am I keeping fresh? And of course, do I exercise it or build its capacity, whether it be meditation or assisted learning or mentoring or that type of thing. What's really powerful in all of those things, and there's a lot of information there, I agree with you, as exciting as that is to me, is the application. So my eldest daughter, she came back from 2 years overseas recently. Where did she travel? As a young girl in her 20s, as an Australian, she travelled to Mexico and she lived there for nearly 2 years. She did travel to Costa Rica and Nicaragua at different times. Now, stereotypes aside, what's your impression about Mexico as a country?
Well,
Right.
You'd probably be a little bit.
Yeah, and you would think, wow, is my 2-year-old daughter going to be safe over in Mexico? Now, if I thought about that, which I did every day, I would lose sleep because I would see that she could be in harm's way, would she be okay? And there was all these things I couldn't do anything about. Okay, so there's my thought that's giving me quite a bit of anxiety and overwhelm at any given time. What's my opportunity? Can I see her in a safe, supported environment, having a lot of fun? Which she constantly told me she was. Living south of the city in the area that she was safe, she was productive, she was engaged in a good community, making a good contribution, her work was fulfilling, etc. So every time I thought of her, I needed to switch that on. And I got better with practice. I had 2 years to try this out. Now, did it have an impact on how I dealt with the situation at the time? Absolutely.
It would have.
Did. I found it much easier to be at peace, to see her having a good time, being safe and well and productive, rather than the other choice. Now, this reality was happening here. And it only happens with practice.
Absolutely.
With understanding the things that we've talked about.
Great example. Shiike, thank you so much for coming on today. It's such a fascinating subject, and thank you for sharing your experience with us today.
You're welcome.